Hello everyone, welcome back. In the first video, you had seen the first two questions of the general studies paper. In this video, we are going to solve the next one. So as you can see, the first question, that is question 1C, is trace the evolution of temple architecture in South India. Now, you already know that temple architecture in South India has great importance. Okay. Now, if you have visited this place, South India, you must have seen the temples are of a different kind all total. Okay. And the South Indian temple architecture is the style in which they have built is called Dravidian style or Dravida style also. You can say that. Okay. And this is an invariable form of Hindu temple that we find in modern Tamil Nadu, especially in the south, which started from the 7th to the 18th century. The characteristics of this type of temple is it's pyramidal, that's in this shape, okay, or kutina type, that is it's a tower form. The lowest portion, that is they call the viha, okay, that is a very small box kind of structure, but the upper portion is huge, massive, and it's a tower kind of structure. So we'll come to the period where this style of temples was built. Firstly, let's go through the slide. It was built in the Gupta period, that started in the Gupta period, and the style is called the Dravidian style. The earliest extant examples of this developed style started from the 7th century rock cut shrines. That means the huge rocks were cut into such pyramid kind of structures to form such kind of temples. And most of the temples were built out of cutting of one single rock piece. Okay, so rock cut shrines were available, were shown in Mahabalipuram, and a structural temple was formed, which was named the Shore Temple in 700, and it was found in the very same site. Next, we come to the periodical order that these temples were formed. Firstly, you see the South Indian style, which is we call the Dravidian style, was splendidly found in Brihadeshwara temple, which is at Thanjavur. And who built it? The person or the great king Raja Raja had built this. Okay. And again, another temple came up, which was which was at Gangai Konda Kolapuram. Okay, please remember the name Gangai Konda Kolapuram, which was built around 1025 by Raja Raja's own son Rajendra Chola. Okay, so this we are starting in the Chola period. Next, we come after that. Subsequently, the style became so elaborate, so popular, and so famous among all the people there that the complex of this temple building started becoming a very a very common feature. By the court became larger, and a number of successive enclosures with each of its own gateway, that is huge gates they had, which was called the gopura, lofty gates actually. So before the temple, they had lofty gates called Gopura. And when we come to the Vijayanagar period, that is after this Chola period, when we come to this Vijayanagar period, around the time period of 1336 to 1565, we find the Gopuras had increased in size so that they dominated the much smaller temples inside the enclosures. By this time, we find that in this Vijayanagar period, what happened? A huge temple was there. Along with that, small temples also came up, and this one Gopura was there, which enclosed the entire temple area. Now, you might have some confusion about what are the ages that had contributed in building such temples. So let's go through that. Firstly, it was the Sangam period. Next came the Pallavas who contributed. Next, the Badami Chalukyas, or you can just name them as Chalukyas. Next was the Rashtrakutas. Next came then the Western Chalukyas. Next, the Pandya. Next came the Cholas that we were reading. Next, the Hoysalas, and next, the Vijayanagara. So all these kingdoms totally contributed in this kind of architecture. So I guess your question is answered. Trace the evolution of temple architecture in South India. You can start by writing the names of these periods, and then you can go to the answer directly. Okay. So next we'll move on to the next question that we have. How did the Bhakti movement contribute to the growth of regional language? Now let me say you, Bhakti movement was such a movement that influenced mass. Okay, it was not regarding a particular group of people or a particular caste. No, definitely no. It influenced the entire mass at that point of time. So let's go to the answer. The Bhakti movement originated in India as a reaction against the caste system and ritualism, especially against Hinduism, because in Hinduism there was such a lot of rituals and the mantras that usually the people said they did not even understand the meaning, what they were trying to say. So, in order to remove this complexity, what they did, they started with a very simple movement called the Bhakti movement, where you need not need priest to communicate with God directly. Okay, that means indirectly you are communicating with God through or via the channel of the priest. You do not need that, definitely. So that is why they started the Bhakti movement, believing that if you are holy enough or if you have that much concentration, you can directly communicate with the soul power. So coming to that, its impact with regard to promoting regional languages and devotional literature, where firstly, the Bhakti saints preached their teachings in local language, unlike Hinduism, which was done in Sanskrit. This led to the development of the local and vernacular language and regional literature. So if somebody is teaching in their local language, so definitely their literature, their vernaculism will increase. So that is what happened with the Bhakti movement. Regional languages such as Hindi, Bhojpuri, Maithili, Oriya, all these became extremely popular among mass. Why? Because this was very simple to understand, very much simple to the way they speak, and not so very difficult as in Sanskrit. Some important literary works in those periods were Ramcharitmanas, which was written by Tulsidas, Gurumukh literature of the Sikh gurus, and the Vaishnava literature in Bengal. So all this was never written in Sanskrit. This was a literature work that was influenced through the Bhakti movement and definitely through the local language. Next, we come to Mirabai. Mirabai enriched poetry with her bhajans. Her brilliant poetry is known as Padavali. Now, in this also, literature work has increased to a great height, and this we find with the work of Padavali. Sant Janeshwar, a Marathi saint and poet, wrote Amritanubhava, a treatise on the spiritual experience, that what he experienced on the soul power and all these written here. And this was also in the local language. So there we come to the answer directly. How did the Bhakti movement contribute to the growth of regional languages? Firstly, let's come to the summary. It was all preached in the local language, unlike Sanskrit, unlike Hinduism, which was done completely on Sanskrit. Next, all these languages like Hindi, Bhojpuri, Maithili, Oriya, the regional languages became very, very, very popular. Next, these Ramcharitmanas by Tulsidas, Gurumukh, and all these literature started coming up, which was also influenced to this regional languages. Mirabai had written Padavali, which became very famous. Sant Janeshwar, a Marathi saint, had written Amrit Anubhava, which also increased its popularity. So this is all about the second answer. We next come to the next answer question, that is, highlight the role of people's movement towards the integration of princely states into the Indian Union. Now, this is a very tactical question. Read the question again. Highlight the role of people's movement towards the integration of princely states into the Indian Union. So here we come to the answer. See, the rising political consciousness and national awakening in British India, with definitely movements like we had Khilafat movement, we had non-cooperation movement, which was started up by Mahatma Gandhi ji, had great impact of the people on the princely states. Okay, because if you can consider Mahatma Gandhi, he was a nation leader. Okay, people started following him like blindly. So if he had started non-cooperation movement against the British, so the princely states were also greatly influenced by that. This resulted in the organization and mobilization of various people in various princely states. They started communicating with each other so as what actions to be taken against the British. The urban middle class organized themselves into Praja and Parishads, or Praja Mandals, if you can call them, with nationalistic ideas that came from the princely states. They were giving them ideas, influencing them against the British. Earliest of them was in Baroda, which started taking place in 1917. The later on, it was conducted in Kathiawar, next Mysore, Hyderabad, and later on it followed. All Indian states, the All India States of People's Conference were organized finally in the year 1927. So first the meeting was conducted in Baroda 1917. From that it took around 10 years to conduct to organize this All India States of People's Conference. So around 10 years later, that is 1927, it came into existence with the aim to influence state governments to initiate necessary reforms in administration and demanding the democratic rights. So we can almost say that with their initiative, a part of our independence was achieved. Now, the activities of Prajamandal movements implemented the constructive programs of the Indian national movement, and in their princely states was establishing schools, using khadi, encouraging cottage industries, and fighting against the practices like untouchability. Not only this, there are various instances where local things were influenced to such an extent that all the British goods that came from Britain into India were all burned down, okay, so as to influence the production and the usage of khadi. Okay, so these things started happening. And from the mid 20s, the Congress also changed their perspective. They affirmed by the presidential address of Mr. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in 1929, which stated that Indian states cannot live apart from the rest of India. So with this declaration in 1938 Haripur session, which was conducted by the Congress, they included the independence of all the princely states as well as its goal of Purna Swaraj. So till this time, we see that all the princely states were excluded from Purna Swaraj, that is complete independence. So now with the declaration of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru in 1938 at Haripur session of Congress, they declared that princely states were also a main part of Purna Swaraj or complete independence. The British cannot do administration into their princely states with their own rules and regulations. So I guess this is the answer to the question. So you can just have a highlight of this. Now highlight the roles of people's movement towards the integration of princely states into Indian Union. Let's do a brief summary. Firstly, it started with the Khilafat movement and the non-cooperation movement initiated by Mahatma Gandhi. Next, we come to see the formation of Praja Parishads or Praja Mandals, and then we find that the session of Baroda in 1970, where the democratic rights were being demanded. Next, we come to the Prajamandal movements, where we see all the princely states were starting to build up schools using khadi, cottage industries, and boycotting all the British goods. Next, we come to the Congress session, which was initiated by Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who said in 1938 at Haripur session of Congress that princely states were also a great part of the goal of Purna Swaraj. So this is the entire answer to this question. So we have completed the questions of A, B, C, D, E. In the next videos, we'll come up with the next questions, that is from question 2. I hope you have got benefit out of it. Keep watching. Thank you.